Which European leader was once attacked by rabbits? Is the question that I will answer by the end of this show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The More You Know Mondays. The more you know, the more you grow. And this week on the show, I'm going to be talking about Atari. But before we get into that, you know what we have to do. We have to start off the show with some Monday affirmations. And I do that every week in the form of a quote. So if you're new here, welcome to the show. Welcome to the fold. I'm not sure what to call you guys yet, but just welcome, innit? And if you are a returning listener or watcher, now we've got this YouTube video thing going on. Welcome back to the fold, and I'm thankful that you came back. That those were the words that I wanted to say, but I'm happy that you've returned and come back for more knowledge and finding out about interesting random topics that I decide to research. And as I researched them, I'm thinking, whoa, this is interesting. More people should know about this, so I share it in my podcast that I call The More You Know Mondays, which is what you're watching or listening to right now. But without further ado, let's go into the Monday affirmations for this week. As I said before, I do that every week in the form of a quote. And this week's quote is by, why don't I just get it up on my computer? Rick Warner. And the quote goes like this. Remember how far you've come, not just how far you have to go. You are not where you want to be, but neither are you where you used to be. And I really like that quote just because it's kind of inspirational in the fact of thinking more again about your mindset. A lot of the time you think, oh no, other people might say to you, oh, you've come so far, and you'll be thinking, have I? But I've still got like so far to go. But in that whole concept, it's like, yeah, you may have so far to go, but you're further than you were maybe a couple of months ago, or the day before, or maybe a year ago. So it's something about your mindset that you have to, I guess, change into believing in yourself more, in that every day or every month that you work at something, you make small changes. And although they aren't noticeable changes on the surface always, they may be changes that are made in you. That sounds wrong, but I mean like within you. That's in you. I mean within you. So in the sense of your mental outlook, how you approach a situation, it may be different because your thinking may be different. And as I said, it's not a surface change that you might see, but it's a within change internally that will possibly be for the better. And I always find that, you look at things with a glass half full kind of situation. Well, where some people might look at that as, oh, well, it's half full. Maybe it's half empty. And it's definitely half full because, I can always refill it with more. By looking at it as half empty, you're looking at it as if it's about to finish. And, with most things, unless it's coming to an end and it needs to come to an end, maybe it doesn't need to finish. Maybe we just need to top it up again and just drink some more. Because if the Kool-Aid is good enough now, why not? I don't know what I was going to say. But I guess it all comes down to decisions that you make about your outlook. And I'm not the type of person to try and tell you what to do, but maybe it's something to think about if you ever find yourself in a situation of, damn, I've done so much, but it feels like I haven't done anything at all. Well, maybe the reason why it doesn't feel like that is because it's not something that you can imminently see. Like when I have this saying or this mantra that I live by, that everything happens for a reason. And I believe in that only in the sense of everything does happen for a reason. And it may not be a reason that you see straight away, but it might be maybe a year down the line. It could be 5 years down the line. It could be maybe the next day, but some point in the future after this thing happens, you'll kind of see the reasons as to why they may have happened. And you'll figure out your own, I don't want to call it, what is the word? Your own, damn, this word is on the tip of my head and the tip of my brain. I should just stop this and like look it up, but I don't even know what word to look up. And then the more I speak about it, it's gone. So I can't remember what I was going to say. But anyway, what I think that you should take away from this quote is that look at a situation with a glass half full. If you feel like you're working hard at something and you're not seeing any noticeable changes, maybe the changes aren't noticeable for you to see right now. Maybe it's something that you're going to see the more you put the work in, the more you continue to work at that certain thing or subject or topic or writing piece or creative idea that you're working on. So, and I see this more so thinking about what I have been researching over the last week with Atari. And it kind of just makes me feel like, yeah, you may not be where you want to be, but you're further than you were before. So that's an achievement at the end of the day. So sometimes it's not always the big things that you need to look for. Sometimes be thankful for the little things, you know? And with that, I will call that my Monday affirmations. And I hope that you take some sort of motivation or inspiration from the quote, if not from what I've said. And with that, we'll move on to the topic at hand, which this week, as I stated at the top of the show, will be Atari. Now, I was speaking to one of my good friends before recording this about how I was going to talk about Atari this week. And she was like, before I just say she, shout out to Split Mind Poet. So yeah, she was saying, I don't know what Atari is. And I was like, listen, as you already posted in your story, if you don't know, get to know on The More You Know, Mondays with Kory. But yeah, so where do we start with Atari? Now, I found it interesting looking into Atari because they had an amazing rise and then they had a fall. And now at the moment, it seems like they're having some sort of rise again, which is interesting. But let's start to see where it all started. So the company Atari Incorporated was founded in 1972. And it was founded by Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney. And these guys are basically responsible for forming the video arcade and modern video game industry. which is kind of crazy when you think about it, as the world that we currently live in is a world where the video game industry is one of the biggest entertainment industries currently out there. And we live in this world where computer games were kind of ostracized in society, demonized. They're still demonized nowadays, but they were kind of seen as this lazy thing. I don't know what it is, but they've gone from kind of being the underdogs in the entertainment industry to now being the forefront and the front runners. If you think about gaming nowadays, you think of like the big boys like Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, but there's not much that I think people know about Atari other than maybe the cult followers from the people that grew up in the era of Atari in the 1970s and 1980s, and this exciting new arcade gaming thing that had popped up. But before we get to 1972, I think we need to start with let's go back to back to 1968. So around this time was when the electrical engineer graduate, Nolan Bushnell, had become an employee at this American electronics company called Ampex. And he worked alongside Ted Dabney. Now, the two found this common interest and became friends. And Nolan Bushnell had this idea. He had this idea for a gaming pizza parlor. And he shared this idea with Ted Dabney. And in sharing the idea, they got to work. They started developing this concept for a standalone computer system that could have a coin slot so people could play the games. And that's how they could get the money from the machines, which is a brilliant idea. No one had thought of it before. So to create a game for this console, they started a partnership with a company called Syzygy Engineering. And each person, both Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney, they put $250 of their own money into support this idea that they had to create this gaming pizza parlor. So while they had started making this, Nolan Bushnell, he had seen this game on a gaming system at the computer labs at Stanford Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. And they were working on this game called Space War. Now, the interesting thing about Space War, or the interesting thing that I find about Space War, is that Space War is the first known video game to be played at multiple computer installations, which means it was basically the very first known multiplayer game. So this multiplayer game was a game that was designed and programmed by Steve Russell in collaboration with a few other developers. This new type of game, multiplayer game, was developed for this newly created microcomputer, which goes by the name of DEC PDP-1. Now, Nolan Bushnell took Ted Dabney to the university to show him this computer, Space War. And the cool thing about Space War is kind of it's the direct inspiration for a game that most people would look at. Because like when I was looking at it, I was like, this basically looks like Asteroid. And as I started doing more research, it's the direct inspiration for Asteroid. But the first game that the founders of Atari started work on was a game called Computer Space. And this game was basically Asteroid before it was Asteroid. I guess to me, it feels like Computer Space was the initial idea, and then they took it back to the drawing board and they rebranded it and redesigned it and came out with Asteroid. So yeah, Computer Space was Nolan and Ted's first game. So they come with this game console that they develop into an arcade machine. And it was a new idea, so they weren't really too sure about how it was going to take off properly. But they worked with this manufacturer company on the game called Notting, and they engineered and marketed and brought this game out commercially. But the unfortunate side is that Computer Space didn't fare too well. It really ended up being a difficult product to sell, and it just wasn't very good. Well, not that it wasn't very good, it wasn't very marketable. A lot of people playing the game, the reviews were that it was too complex for them to play, which is why I feel like they took it back to the drawing board and created Asteroid, which was, I guess, a simpler version of Computer Space. So they go back to the drawing board. They're not working with Notting anymore because Notting was just like, well, guys, you created this game console, this arcade machine. We put it up in our stores, but people aren't enjoying it. So I understand you're going to probably work on something new, but, you know, we don't want to be a part of it. Which is when they started seeking out new kind of partners outside of Notting. Which is when they first established working on or with the company Syzygy. Sorry, I can't say this word. Syzygy. I'm going to put it up on the screen for my video watchers. It'll be on the screen in it. I can't say it very well, but it's Syzygy. Syzygy, I think it says. So they formed this partnership with Syzygy instead. Now, this is where it starts to get exciting. In 1972 is when they founded the company for Atari. Now, Atari. Why Atari? Now, the interesting thing about the name of Atari is that the name comes from a Japanese game by the name of Go. And I think I know the game. Oh no, I don't know this game at all. Damn, where did it go? Where did it go? It's because I clicked on it and closed it. So, Go was Nolan Bushnell's favorite game. And it's basically a Japanese game which involves black and white, I guess, checkers from what the pictures look like. And Atari is, in that game, their version of Checkmate, I guess. So they wanted to call the company, also they named the company after the Japanese Checkmate move to the game Go. Also, another thing that I need to go back in, looking back over my notes, is saying that Shinji, the company that I said was manufacturing Atari, that's wrong. So Shinji, the name that I'm going to put up on the screen right here or something, is like, that was Shinji Incorporated, I think it was, or Shinji Engineering, or Shinji. It was actually just called Shinji. Shinji, that was the name of Atari before it was Atari. Now, when they were trying to officially name the company, they found out that in the state of California, the name Shinji was already used for the name of a company, so they couldn't use that name. So that's why they decided to go with Atari. Because, yeah. And we've got to the bottom of that and cleared up that. So, not that I was spreading misinformation before, but I was reading back over my notes and realized what I was actually saying was wrong. So the company that manufactured the newer machines was called Bally Manufacturing. And this is where I think it gets really interesting for me, is that Pong is Atari's very first game. Pong comes from kind of a recreation, I guess, of the game, the very first game console, or very first home game console that came out around 1972. So this game console was called the Magnavox Odyssey. And it's the very first home video game console, which I'll probably do an episode on in the future. So they had this game in their package as they were first coming out. They had some sort of tennis game. So Nolan Bushnell, he saw this game being demonstrated, this tennis type game being demonstrated on the Magnavox Odyssey, Oxus, because the Vox got me confused. And this tennis game was basically a simple tennis game that became kind of the direct inspiration for Pong. And now, if you think of Pong, Pong is just basically that game where there is like a pad here, and only if you're watching the video, you'll know what I'm talking about. The pad here, and then there's a pad here, and then there's like a line in the middle. And then like each person controlled each pad, and there's like that ball. So the ball will like go through the line and hit this pad, and then on the other side you would have to try and knock that back to the other side. And the aim of the game is to kind of knock it into the void area so that the other person isn't able to hit it back. So it's basically tennis, if it goes out, then the other person scores a point. But this was the breakout arcade game to come out on the very first Atari. Now, in the team that engineered this game was someone that we're all familiar of, a guy by the name of Steve Jobs was part of the team making Pong. And we know Steve Jobs, who futurely became one of the founders of Apple. Coincidentally, another one of the founders of Apple, Steve Wozniak's, he was also an employee at Atari. He was one of the designers for their breakout game. I didn't mean to say breakout game, but their breakout game, their game called Breakout is what I mean. Their arcade game called Breakout. And Steve Wozniak was one of the designers in this game. Now, for anyone that doesn't know what Breakout might be, Breakout is basically, everyone's probably played a version of Breakout on like their phone, but Breakout again is basically like, so you've got the pads at the bottom and then you've got the blocks at the top, and then you've got to knock that ball on your pad and destroy the blocks on the top. And yeah, if the ball goes out, then you lose a life. And yeah, Breakout, the very first, the original game of that everyone plays on their mobile phone. They play a version of it. I play a version of it on my phone. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And apparently that was the stars of Apple. So it's kind of interesting for me and kind of cool being an Apple consumer, not just the fruit, but I mean the phones, the computer. That's all the Apple stuff I have. The phone, the computer. I had an iPod back in the day, man. I champion Apple. I'm not an Android. But yeah, so if it wasn't for Atari, maybe we wouldn't have Apple. So Atari are quite important, guys. So that's why you should know more about them. It's like finding out. I can't think of a cool scenario. Like I was gonna say like the Avengers before they were in the Avengers. That would be cool to watch as a film. Like watching like, I don't know, like like kind of like X-Men. Like when you see what's it called? You see like the Wolverine movie, like, so you see like what it was like before Wolverine, and he had like the bones, and then when he gets like the metal, like a what origin story? Yeah, like origin stories are interesting. So yeah, I just thought that was very interesting, finding out that two of the founders of Apple both started working at Atari. And another interesting fact that I found through my research is that from after they were working on a few products with after they were working on a few products with Atari, that's when Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs broke out and created the Apple II. Another interesting fact is they offered the Apple II to Atari so Atari could possibly manufacture it, and unfortunately Atari turned them down, which might have been one of the worst ideas that Atari made. Imagine like Atari had decided to be like, do you know what? Yeah. We'll help invest. We'll manufacture this. It could have been like Atari could have been part of Apple. Anyway, so yeah, they broke away. The rest is really history. I'll probably do another episode on the Apple II and that kind of origin story. But these origin stories about like tech geniuses, it's kind of interesting because it's like, it's like the origin stories of all of the things that we use today. So that's why I kind of find it interesting. And Pong is kind of like, it was an instant hit. Like how do I I don't know. It was an instant hit. Like people loved Pong. And it flew off the shelves, these arcade machines, wherever it was in these busy locations. People loved playing it. And this was the start of Atari's rise to success. Like, they became one of the fastest growing companies in US history, which is kind of crazy because for me, when I read these numbers, it was like in 1977, they went from an annual revenue of $75 million a year to 3 years later having an annual revenue of $2 billion a year. Like, that, I'm blown away just about the numbers. That's like, they earned, quick maths would be 815. Yeah, 815. Or was that, no, would that be 915? Maybe $915 million. They made more. No, not even 900, because that'd be only me $1 billion. Like, it's like 1 point. Damn it, they made like a whole billion. I don't know how that's crazy. But like, if you look at their crazy growth, you can see why the video game industry, the modern video game industry as it is like now, is booming, because this is the growth. When a game comes out and it strikes gold, it's gold, it's out. And the reason why it was gold, it was like, imagine these machines, they were 25 cents a pop. So you could put 25 cents in, which I assume in American money is a quarter. And you put a quarter in a machine and you could play the game. A quarter isn't $1. I don't know how American money works. I don't know. It's like is a quarter like 25p? I guess. I don't. Like I said, even when I went to America, money never made no sense to me. They're just bare extra coins. And I don't know. I work on whole numbers out there, man. So it makes sense, like a quarter. I don't know. But yeah, 25 cents, you put that in. I don't know, is 25 cents even a quarter? Are they the same thing? Who knows? So yeah, 25 cents, you put it in the machine, you could play a game of Pong. The problem was that, again, after installing this machine in one location, they got cooled down. And they thought it was because the machine was broken, and they found out, no, the machine wasn't broken. It was just the coin slot where people put the coins in, that part was broken, because so many people were putting so many coins in to play this game. It hit. Like, even the numbers it was making. So like, Pong in busy locations would earn more than $300 a week. And that was a huge increase, because the typical games that they would have in like bars and stuff like that would usually be pinball. And pinball was only generating about $50 a week. So those two, that was crazy extension from there. And then Atari eventually sold more than 8,000 Pong machines at the time when it was released, and that was way more than what the pinball machines were shifting at that time, which was only probably about 2,500 units, which is how you can see how Pong flooded everyone couldn't get enough of Atari's Pong. So, which is crazy. From the start, you would think, well, wow, they had such a boom. Like, why did they crash? And I found that to be like kind of both interesting and like kind of disheartening. Obviously for them, because like they built up so much, they've done so much. They created the founders of Apple. So there's a lot about this that I'm skipping over to do the crash now. But if you're interested, do your due diligence and research. I'm not going to tell you everything, because what would be the point of me giving you some of the information about a topic? If I give you everything, you wouldn't have anything to look up or anything to find yourself. But yeah, So the crash. So the crash came with the video game industry changing. Now, around the time of the crash was probably 1983. And this was, I don't know, like the company had been around for about 10 years. And they were winning. They were high flying for 10 years. But then, there's always a little change that switches things up. And then it's just about how the surrounding companies move with the flex and the curves. But unfortunately for Atari at the time, they were, I guess, kind of being blindsided by all of the cancellations of orders that they were starting to have from distributors. Now, this was around the time when, other companies, their competitors, were creating newer, more exciting machines, creating newer, more exciting games. And, a lot of Atari's rivals had better games than the Atari systems currently had, which is, I guess, the main thing which kind of brought their downfall. So you see, in 1981, before the video game crash that they had, Atari acquired the licenses for Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then also the license for the blockbuster film E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which released in June 1982. Now, they had the rights to make the video games for both games, to make the video game version of both movies. And they were going to make these games to be released for the holiday season of 1982. Now, where the problem came, from what I found, which was so savage from reading it, is that, not many people bought the game. And the problem is because they were having so many cancellations from their distributors, the distributors that were still around selling Atari consoles and games, they basically ended up having more in storage than they ended up actually selling. So they made about 5 million copies that they produced and only sold 1.5 million. And then, to add insult to injury, the E.T. game that they brought out has been critically and was. So I'm getting these words out. So the E.T. game that they created has become known as one of the worst games ever made in history, which is savage. Can you imagine? You're in your heyday. They were getting they had a port for Donkey Kong, the game that was famously made by Nintendo, and they had acquired a license for that. And they were porting games, and they were working hand in hand in companies, but started around the release of the Atari 2600. And just because a lot of the competitors had better games, like I said before, and having the worst game ever made that released in 1982, and then you have a video game crash with all these other competitors coming out that just so have better games. And, the audience will only, I guess, for a while Atari were in their heyday, there wasn't anything else out there that could match them. But once the market kind of opened up and there was more competition that was kind of, I guess, feeding to different audiences, Atari could no longer compete. So they were just losing money, I guess. They made games that didn't sell, that couldn't sell because the distributors had already cancelled their orders with them, so they had no one to sell to other than the distributors that had still hung on. They went from making $2 billion a year to having share prices that were falling out. Like, I think, where did it say about the share prices? Yeah, it says their share prices, they lost like over $100 million in profit in the same quarter of 1982, when they made the worst game ever. Not to mention their fallout that they had with Nintendo, which cost them Donkey Kong. They had a working relationship with Nintendo, which ended up falling to the side, with Nintendo dropping out and them losing the rights to Donkey Kong. So this financial problem continued throughout the rest of 1938, with the second quarter them losing $310 million. Like, that's crazy. They lost a lot of money in a very short time. And I say short time. I say short in the sense of they were only winning for about 10 years before they saw the video game crash of so many consoles, or competitive consoles, coming out with, unfortunate for the time, but I guess better game designers and creating better games. And unfortunately, that was the downfall for the Atari company, and why, like, they're not seen in so much in the forefront of gaming right now. They have just released the Atari Retro. They just released a new console. What is it called? The Atari VCS is a new kind of console computer hybrid. I watched like a video of the game being unboxed, the console being unboxed and everything. It's an interesting console, but I mean, the only downside that I saw about it is that you have to buy the console and a controller separately. So, like, I think the console comes up to about, like, say maybe about $300, and then the controller would be $60. So for you to get the console and be able to play, it's still going to cost you about $360, which is like in the realms of the next gen consoles that have just kind of come out. Like the lowest brand of, I think, PlayStation and Xbox are around $350. So I don't know, man. It's for retro gaming, I guess, and to play Atari's classics. And it also runs Windows and Linux, I believe, as well, which is pretty cool. So you can emulate games maybe on there as well. But they have also, another interesting thing that Atari are doing at this moment in time is that they have started working on a new type of gaming experience. So they believe that blockchain technology is poised to be very important in the transformation of the current economic ecosystem. But they also believe that it's especially to be interesting and important in the video game world and in many aspects the digital entertainment industry. So they've been working on a platform based on blockchain technology, which will have its own cryptocurrency, which they've called Atari token. And it will work somewhat in tandem with the Atari Casino. But that's really kind of interesting because after, falling down this kind of rabbit hole and losing so much, they've still managed to be around and be relevant. Another interesting thing about Atari, like they own the license to Roller Coaster Tycoon. So any new Roller Coaster Tycoon games, like they're in cahoots, in partnership in making that. So that's kind of cool. But Atari are a very interesting company, and I believe that people should definitely be on the lookout for what Atari are doing with the blockchain, their blockchain technology. And I will do another episode on solely that, because we've gone through a lot in this episode and also not that much at the same time. So there's so much that happened within Atari and so much that they've done. But I feel like I've mentioned a nice brief brushstroke of what they've done, the rise, the fall, and how they may be re-rising in a new type of gaming industry that not many of the forefronting big game companies have maybe looked into as of yet. So when this becomes a new type of gaming industry, Atari will be in the front running of all that. So that's really exciting and really interesting for me. But yeah, we'll call that the end of Atari for now. And we will go on to answering the question that I posed at the top of the question. the top of the show. That's how I know it's getting to the end of the show. Because my brain starts. So I said, which European leader which European leader was once attacked by rabbits? And the answer, for anyone that doesn't already know, is Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, he was one of the most powerful men in European history. But that's why I kind of find it so hilarious that he was once attacked by rabbits. To be exact, he was attacked by 1,000 rabbits. And the story is pretty funny. So it goes like this. Napoleon's chief of staff had organized a rabbit hunt to celebrate a military victory. So he brought 1,000 rabbits that he put in cages, and the idea was to set them loose, and they were going to have a rabbit hunt, like I said. And unfortunately, this plan kind of backfired on them. When they set loose the rabbits weren't having any of it, and they, instead of running away when they were set loose, they turned and attacked everyone who was involved in the rabbit hunt, including Napoleon. So the great emperor had to clamber away to safety to his carriage while he was swarmed by 1,000 angry rabbits who were not willing to die that day. And go the rabbits, But yeah, we'll call that the end of this week's episode. So I do hope you've learned something this week, something that you didn't know before prior to the week, today, listening to this show. Hopefully I haven't confused you and you've kept up with what I've been talking about, but I don't know, like, if you're watching this on YouTube, please drop some comments down below, and let me know what you're thinking, man. I can only be as good as my weakest link, which is myself, so I can always get better. And yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you've learned something, as I think I've repeated prior to this. Maybe this is the second time of me saying it. I hope you've learned something. Now that's the third time I've said it. I'm just playing. Yeah, man. Keep these positive energies and positive vibes going throughout the week. Smile when you can. Smile when you're not feeling happy, so that it forces yourself to be happy. And I don't mean that maliciously. I mean it in the sense of smiling makes you happy, so try it. But yeah, if you don't want to smile, don't smile. I can't force you. I'm just one man. My opinion means nothing, so take it or leave it. But yeah, so we'll call this the end. Hopefully you like my funky shirt if you're watching at home. But if you've enjoyed this episode, stay tuned for next week when I talk about another subject, which I haven't right now decided on, but I'm sure the idea of what I will want to talk about will come to me during this week. Usually around Monday, Tuesday, I'm looking into something random and I come up with a topic and I'm like, oh yeah, this would be interesting to talk more about. But yeah, so we've come to the end. Hope you've enjoyed, and I'll leave it there because I'm just rambling now. Thank you for listening and goodbye.